Okay, we're going to shoot this video to explain to our distributors and master distributors as a training tool. We're going to walk through the steps of the demonstration. So you guys can play this tape over and over to yourself until you get the steps down. And I'm going to explain as I go along so you can pick up what we're doing and why we're doing it. First thing you want to do is clean your machine, which we have already. You've got a fresh bearing in here. We're going to turn the machine on. We're going to point out that our amps are just over 5. One of the things that I want to point out is this machine is equipped with an amp meter. So as we add more and more weight, this needle will start to move up, showing that there is a load putting on this electrical motor. And the heavier the weight gets, the more loaded that this electrical motor is going to become, and it will reflect here with this needle. So the first step that we're going to do is a dry run, okay? The dry run is not going to have the cup on, just the bearing against the race. We're going to take 4 to 5 weights. If this machine is set properly, it sees up at 4. Okay. Notice our needle's moving there as it seizes up. If it seizes up at 3 weights right when you're about to put the 4th one, that's okay. If it seizes up at 5 weights, that's okay too. This machine is set a little light. Some of our distributors like to have it set a little heavy. The heavier it's set, the more weight it's going to take. The lighter it's set, the less weight it's going to take. That can all be adjusted over here with your wing nut over here, which will slide the machine either backwards, which will tighten the belt. The tighter the belt is, the more weight it's going to take dry. So if I want to get this thing to take 4 weights, I'm going to give it a turn here. And that turn right there is going to push the machine back a little bit. We'll turn the bearing to a new spot. And let's see if we got the machine set right now. I like it right at 4 weights. Okay, now we've got the machine set where we want it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add motor oil and turn the bearing. What I like to do is go ahead and get a synthetic oil. Either Mobil 1 or Castrol Syntec are the 2 most popular synthetics out there to kind of end all arguments. Go ahead and use a little bit better than average. You know, don't use Walmart SuperTech or some of your crappier oils or cheaper oils. I might not say the word crappy, but going with a higher quality oil, Castrol GTX is a good one, or you know, any Quaker State Pennzoil, any of those oils right there. Now we're going to rotate our bearing to a new spot. So we're going to get a clean spot on the bearing. I'm going to take our weight off. Now, before I start, it's important that when you're putting the weights on that you keep everything lined up. Okay? It's also important that you grab a couple extra than you think you need. Because just at that time you try to guess it perfect, you're going to take one more weight. And by the time it takes you to reach over here, regroup, grab an extra weight, that bearing is spinning on that race and wearing a deeper and deeper gouge, spreading out the surface area, thus causing less pressure or less PSI the wider that wear scar gets. So you got to understand your physics. The longer we grind on this wheel, the more, the less actually PSI that we're applying to the bearing. The smaller the contact spot on the bearing, the more PSI. So that's why we don't want to play around and let that grind out, because that scar will get to such a size to where these weights will no longer represent 7,500 pounds. They only maybe represent 1,000 pounds. And we know that at 20 weights, that's 20,000 pounds. We know regular motor oil will take that amount of pressure. So you got to understand that you need to have your things lined up. I like to get 8 weights just in case and get them all lined up on the same spot. And we're going to put our bearing holder back on. Grab our 8 weights, get them lined up. Six weights. That's perfect. Go ahead and lift up. And I don't know if I pointed out, but it's always a good idea to point out to your customer as you're setting the weights on there to make him watch the needle. And with each weight placed on there, that needle will go a little bit higher and a little bit higher and a little bit higher. Okay, so that's a step that you don't want to skip. Then you compare wear scars. And you'll note that the wear scar with the oil is going to be about 20 to 30% smaller than the wear scar with the dry. And when we do an actual live demo, we're actually going to show you the bearing at that time. Okay? But since this is for master distributors and dealers, you're just going to have to take my word for it. Now, at this point, we're going to add power up. We're not going to turn our bearing. We're going to take the power up. And when putting the power up in, make sure if you're using the old style applicator bottle, we're moving to a flip top that's got a wider nozzle in it. But if you're using the old style applicator bottle like this one, make sure that you cut the tip off just above the little niche here that holds the red cap on. That gives you a wide hole and allows you to give this a good squirt. If you got that tiny little pinhole on there, it looks like you're squirting power up in there forever, and it looks like you're over treating. Now, what I like to do is give it a good shot and give it a good squeeze. Okay? I don't mess around and drizzle it in. I just tip the bottle over, give it a good squeeze, and make sure you use more than enough. And the reason is we're not trying to be unfair, but we're fixing to dump all of the power up and oil out and contaminate it with antifreeze. So you want to be a little bit liberal with it. If you get an objection, which you won't, if you do it quickly, you can always come back and say, in a minute I'm going to pour that out, and I'm going to show you how strong one drop is. But the veterans and the guys that have practiced this demo over and over and over again, you know, 1 out of 50 demos, you'll get someone that'll object to that, okay? So tip the power up over, give it a good squirt, make sure you use more than enough, and your demo is going to go more smooth. Now, if you give it a good shot, you're not going to have to worry about it seizing up. Also, keep in mind is that we're trying to hurry this demo along. We're not going to sit here and let that race mix that oil up in the time that it really needs. This is not an engine or a hydraulic system that's got a lot of force or a lot of pressure and really getting that oil stirred up, especially on a cold morning when that oil is thick as a molasses for some of you guys up north. When you pour the power up in, you do need to sit there and start talking about something, because it is going to ribbon, and you can see that it's taking its time tying into the molecular structure of the oil. So, you know, do something, talk about something, and let that oil, that power up emulsify into the oil. Okay, now we're ready to go. All you're going to do, you're not going to turn the bearing, you're going to leave the wear scar, and you're going to tell your customer that what we're going to do for this time, at this point, we're going to turn the bearing later, but right now, all we want to do is pick up where the oil failed. All we're going to do is add power up. We're not going to remove the weights, we're not going to turn the bearing, and we're just going to let you listen to the difference. We were completely seized up at 6 weights, and all I did is add a little power up. I want you to listen to the difference. Now, did you hear that little squeal and then it smooth out after 2 or 3 revolutions of the wheel? That's establishing our boundary lubricant at the point of contact. What I like to do is explain that our product is equipped with extreme pressure agents and boundary lubricants that are willing to keep those moving metals separate. Now, at this point, we may be under hydrodynamic lubrication, where those that oil film and those metals are just hydroplaning across one another. But once we get to 3 and 4 and 5 weights under regular oil, that oil film starts to shear. And when you get oil film shearing, you start to hear that metal squealing. And then with the 3rd weight and the 4th weight and the 5th weight and the 6th weight, it finally gets too severe where it gives up. Power Up, you need to explain, it's got those boundary lubricants and those supercharged extreme pressure agents that will give that film strength a lot more lubricity. And we can even add more weight on. And I like to take it a little slow at first. I don't want to rush and throw all 20 weights on all at once. You want to let that get hot. Heat is one of Power Up's components, actually. Radicals are released as Power Up gets hotter, and it causes the lubricant and the boundary lubricants to perform better. So don't rush all 20 weights on there all at once. You might get up there to 16 or 17 and seize the race up. So take your time putting the weights on. Talk a little bit in between. And take it all the way up. After it's had a chance to heat up, you shouldn't have anything to worry about. Now, we've got all 20 weights on there. This thing is really going to start heating up and you're going to start seeing some oxidation. Once you start seeing some oxidation, some smoke, this thing's getting hot. It's a good time to grab your temp gun and show them that we're running about 250. Anything over 250, you want to go ahead and drop the oil supply. It's really starting to heat up at this point. Drop the oil, pour out about everything but a thimble worth. And so I've left everything but a thimble of oil left in the bottom there. And then I'm going to replace the cup. This is one of the reasons you give it a good shot at the beginning, because you pour most of the oil and Power Up out. And now we're making way for our antifreeze. But before we do that, we see severe smoking, and we're going to show them that we're well over 300 degrees. The significance of this is we're at 326. The significance of this is when you're going head-to-head with another additive, or you're going head-to-head with an oil like Royal Purple or some of these other lubricants that may take the 20 weights, once they hit 320, 350, they're going to crap out 99% of the time. Now it's time to add our water and antifreeze. With Power Up, I've gone to 500 degrees and it's still running. You don't want to do that very often because you'll fill the room full of smoke and it's hard to breathe. Now we're going to add our antifreeze. Now there's a good chance that if I didn't put that that oil, some of that oil in there, that we could have seized it up. So make sure that you leave just a little oil and Power Up in there, and it's going to take that severe load. Okay, now at this point you want to turn your machine off. Okay? That water and antifreeze is going to be boiling, and once it starts boiling, you want to turn the machine off. And then you start taking your weights off. Once you take all your weights off, you can turn your machine back on. Sometimes, once it starts boiling, I'll just start taking the weights off and I'll leave the machine running. There's a critical point in this presentation that I'm going to get to that I really like to show, and that's the retention agents of Power Up. And to show that, I want it to run in that water and antifreeze. And as I take this, make sure that you use a towel when you take this bearing holder off. Get you a red shop rag or a towel. Now keep that running as it's cooling that race off. Now we want to show our customers how we've scored the race. The race should be purple, blue, and brown around the edges. And you could tell them that these bearings are tempered at 450 degrees. And when it's really black and blue and purple around there, they know that at the contact point we were running in excess of 450 degrees as we're changing the temper of those bearings. Okay? Now, what I like to do is turn the machine off at this point and bring my customers over to the race and show them that even though we were running in 90%, 95% water and antifreeze, I want them to touch that race, and that's why I like to let it run in the water and antifreeze, because that's cooling it down as you're taking the weights off. And if you just take your finger and rub it like that, you can let them feel that film. You can feel that attraction that Power Up has to the metal surface. Okay, now with Power Up, the difference is it's going to keep a protective coating on that surface. And when you start that engine, that film of protection is already there. And with that magnetic attraction, most metals have a negative charge, Power Up has a positive charge. When you shut that engine down and let it sit overnight, and you can't crank it back up the next morning or next week or even all winter long, that film is going to stay on there. And that's what we call fluid film affinity retention. And it's the product leaves a thin coating or a thin layer of protection all over those internal engine parts. That's important that you stress that to your customers. Sometimes I like to tell a story about a engine remanufacturer in Abilene, Texas that uses Power Up to mist all of the engine parts before he assembles them. And he's an engine rebuilder. He may rebuild an engine and it may sit in his warehouse for 6 months before it actually goes into a vehicle or into a truck. And before he started using Power Up, he was getting engines returned. The longer they sit, the more chances there were that engine would have a failure because of all that oil and all that condensation going on would cause that engine to rust from the inside out. And when they'd crank it for the first time, it would lock right up. When he started using Power Up in all of his oil, he would actually mix it with a 10-weight oil and mist all of his parts, assemble them. He got less than 1 in 1,000 returned after starting using Power Up to mist those engine parts before they were assembled. And that just shows you how good of retention this product has. Now, what we're going to do at this point is we're going to turn the bearing to a new spot, and we're going to put the same amount of weight that we had on before when it failed with the synthetic oil, which was 6 weights. Okay? We're also going to point out the amp meter here, because as we were putting those weights on before, that needle was moving. And we're going to show them that needle is probably not going to move a bit after we put the weights on here on a new contact area. Now this is an apples to apples test that is a surefire. I'll even throw a 7th weight on there just for good measure. And when you take that off, you show them that wear scar, that tiny little buffed area that I'm going to show you during the demonstration segment. We're going to show close-ups of this bearing. You're going to see the difference. Okay? So once you do that, you're actually going to take your water and antifreeze and oil, pour it away. You're going to take a paper towel. You're going to wipe the race. You're going to wipe the bearing. Place it back up there. We should be right back to where we started. See the metal-to-metal contact? And it seizes right back up. At this point, remove the bearing holder, grab your bottle of Power Up, set you a drop right there. If there's any objections before, trust me, they'll go away at this point, because you're going to show them how concentrated and how strong Power Up is. Just one drop. Ask your customer to take their finger, touch that drop, and turn the machine off for them, and just have them touch the bottom of the race there. They don't even have to coat the whole tire race. Just have them cover the bottom of it. Replace. Your bearing holder, turn your machine on. Sometimes it'll go right off. Sometimes you may have to lift up on it a little bit and help it. In this case, it just took off. This is the more impressive case. When you just flip that electricity, you had a completely stalled, galded. In some cases, these metals will actually weld and stick together. And when you just rub a little Power Up on there, turn that machine back on, as long as it'll turn one time, that's enough for that film to catch. And after that point, then you can really get crazy. You take the weights, and you can be pretty aggressive with them. You don't really have to baby them on there, because you've got Power Up running straight. And you can see how hot that's getting. And that concludes your demo.